They call this place Crescent Peak, a small, hidden settlement nestled high among steep ridges and dense evergreen forests. Few travelers pass through willingly. Fewer still choose to remain. Over the years, countless rumors have drifted down these winding roads. Fragments of old folklore, talk of uncanny howls echoing beneath the full moon, and furtive glances whenever the subject of wolves arises. Some visitors dismiss it as mere superstition. Others depart with a lingering unease they cannot explain. In recent months, a sequence of events has drawn new attention to Crescent Peak. Incidents that have stoked curiosity and dread in equal measure. From the outside, the settlement appears unremarkable. Log cabins clustered around a main street, locals tending to routine tasks, life going on with quiet simplicity. Yet, beneath the surface, a potent undercurrent of mystery flows. An undercurrent that a newcomer named Elara unwittingly stirred into motion. On the tail end of a brisk autumn day, when golden leaves glowed in the last remnants of sunlight. Initially there was no welcome sign, no official boundary. But as the road curved, the sense of entering an entirely different world grew undeniable. The air itself felt charged, as though something unseen brushed by in the wind. Locals could be spotted at a distance, pausing mid-conversation to watch any unknown car pass. At first, it seemed like typical caution. Yet accounts whispered at the post office and the small solitary cafe told a more layered story. That Crescent Peak values secrecy almost as much as it does survival. Elara's experiences here, a young woman with a determined spirit, who arrived looking for nothing more than a fresh start. Prior to Crescent Peak, Elara lived in a series of bustling cities, never quite settling. She hoped these mountains would offer peace. Instead, she began to notice something distinctly different about the people who called this place home. Shortly after her arrival, Elara connected with a small group of locals. Among them was Tristan, a reserved man whose careful politeness made him simultaneously approachable and distant. Tall, sharp-eyed, Tristan carried an air of quiet vigilance that set him apart from the town's more casual inhabitants. Whenever Elara, or anyone else, brought up odd sightings in the woods, rapid shadows under the moon, fresh animal tracks too large to be from regular wildlife, Tristan merely shrugged, his gaze flicking away, as though the topic pressed too close to the community's hidden truths. Elara's curiosity grew with every subtle sign. She heard snippets of conversation at the cafe, where townspeople spoke in code-like phrases about the pack, quickly changing the subject whenever an outsider sat nearby. She noticed lights in certain houses that stayed on until dawn, and the faint, haunting sound of howling that sometimes sliced through the midnight silence. No one confirmed it openly, yet no one fully denied it either. When Elara asked direct questions, she was met with guarded half-answers. At times, an older resident might offer a cryptic tidbit, "This land has its own kind of guardians," or "Don't wander alone too close to midnight," before pressing their lips shut. The sense of an invisible boundary persisted, as if the entire town balanced on a line between ordinary human life and something far more primal. Then, an unexpected name began to surface whenever conversation veered toward unspoken rules. Jasper, almost never seen, yet seemingly felt everywhere. Town rumor painted him as a figure of reverence, or possibly fear. No one would clarify his exact role. No one would say where he lived. But whenever a disturbance occurred, like a sudden disappearance of livestock or the appearance of strange claw marks in the foothills, those who mentioned Jasper did so in hushed voices, hinting that if trouble truly threatened Crescent Peak, he would act. In the midst of this swirling uncertainty, Elara found a tentative sense of acceptance. She received an invitation to a small get-together, a birthday gathering, held in her honor at the modest house she'd rented near the Pines. Friends she had made, some only weeks before, arrived with homemade gifts and well wishes. Music and laughter echoed under string lights. On the surface, it felt like any ordinary celebration. But beneath that surface, Elara carried the weight of countless questions. Why did some neighbors look at her with something akin to pity, or perhaps warning, when they offered a toast? Why did Tristan linger at the edges of the room, watchful and tense, as though prepared for something to go wrong. Multiple eyewitnesses describe how, as the evening wore on, Elara's laughter occasionally faltered, a subtle crack in her warm exterior. She might have been thinking about the odd prickle in the back of her neck whenever she stood by the open window, or the glances Tristan darted at her whenever the conversation shifted to nighttime prowlers. Even so, the gathering ended without incident, just a mild sense of unease that no one could quite articulate. When the final well-wisher departed, Elara was left with half-melted candles, empty mugs, and a feeling she couldn't shake, that something out of the ordinary was looming on the horizon. Before midnight, a solitary knock sounded at her door, a knock more insistent than any courtesy visit. Whoever stood there didn't wait long. Elara later recounted how her heart skipped a beat at the abruptness. She'd expected no more guests. Upon opening it, she found a courier, delivering a small, unmarked box, and the individual left as quickly as they'd appeared. Inside that box, she discovered a silver bracelet, elegant yet unsettling in its craftsmanship. Accompanying it was a brief, unsigned note. A single line that read, "A birthday is no small occasion here." The note carried an aura of quiet authority. The closest lead anyone could offer was that it somehow related to Jasper. Yet how he knew about Elara's birthday, or why he bothered to mark it, remained a mystery. That same night, shortly after the gift arrived, an unsettling chill crept through the air. Outside, a faint gust rattled branches against window panes. Inside, Elara found her thoughts drawn to rumors of a so-called pack patrolling these hills. Was there any truth to them? A page from her personal journal, dated that evening, mentions feeling watched even after her guests were gone. The exact wording: "It's like the house is no longer just mine tonight." By all surviving accounts, the hours leading up to dawn held an undercurrent of tension, so thick it bordered on oppressive. Though nothing dramatic had yet occurred, a sense of foreboding laced every passing minute. If you asked her then, Elara would have insisted she was merely spooked by local legends. After all, she'd never witnessed anything explicitly supernatural. Not yet. Crescent Peak soon became ground zero for a cascade of extraordinary events that would challenge everything Elara thought she knew about safety, and everything the townspeople believed about secrecy. In the coming pages of her testimony, she describes a singular, horrific moment that shattered the peaceful facade she had clung to. A single noise, something far more predatory than the wind, erupted in the silence, forcing her to confront the stark reality behind the whispers. We do not yet know how or why fate chose Elara for what happened next, nor do we fully grasp the extent of the transformation that followed. But in the next segment of our investigation, we will chart the final hours before dawn, a time when at least one local claims to have seen a silhouette lurking near Elara's window, tall, broad-shouldered, radiating an inhuman stillness. Others reported hearing an eerie growl echo across the ridge. All separate sightings, yet adding up to an unsettling picture. If one believes the rumors, that silhouette may have belonged to none other than Jasper himself, or to something that served him, something or someone from within the pack. If one chooses skepticism, it might simply be a coincidence. Nevertheless, for Elara, the line between myth and tangible danger was about to blur in ways she never could have anticipated. To this day, the residents of Crescent Peak remain divided about the events that unfolded under that sliver of moon. Some insist Elara provoked forces better left dormant. Others claim she was merely a victim of an age-old dance between her new neighbors and the feral unknown prowling the mountains. Perhaps both are true. What is certain is that the road to morning brought with it a reckoning. No single birthday wish or friendly invitation could have prevented. And so we leave Elara in that uneasy silence, standing in the hallway of her own house, clutching a silver bracelet she never asked for, her breath quivering as if bracing for the next knock or the next noise. When that noise did come, it was neither a courteous knock nor a gentle wind. It was something far more primal, an intrusion that would topple the precarious balance of life in Crescent Peak and catapult her into a world where secrets become power and loyalty blurs into something wild. An hour beyond midnight, In a house that had grown strangely silent after its modest celebration, Elara found herself in a restless twilight between wakefulness and exhaustion. Witness statements differ on when the first signs of trouble emerged. Some recall distant snarls in the hills. Others mention fleeting shadows across her windows. Yet all accounts converge on one critical moment, the instant a savage force shattered the fragile boundary between an outsider's private refuge and the primal secrets of Crescent Peak. No one claims to have seen the start of the attack firsthand. The windows were closed, the lantern light dimmed, and most townspeople, werewolf or otherwise, had long since gone to bed. Yet at some unknown minute in the early morning, a fierce crash tore through the stillness. What happened next would mark the true beginning of Elara's ordeal. According to later inspections, the bedroom window shattered inward with tremendous force, shards of glass littering the floor, forming a jagged arc from the sill toward the center of the room. A few pieces were embedded in the nearby wall, suggesting an impact so violent it broke timber and glass in one swift blow. In a recorded statement taken soon after, Elara described waking to that thunderous sound. It took her disoriented mind a moment to grasp that her window no longer existed. When she scrambled to turn on a light, she discovered an enormous creature advancing toward her bed. A hulking silhouette, low to the ground, muzzle drawn back in a snarl. Though she would struggle later to recount every detail, she remembered the scent of wet fur, the gleam of teeth in the moonlight, and the raw malice radiating from its gaze. No single term fully captures what she faced. Locals would say a rogue wolf, but the size alone defied that label. It moved with an intelligence far beyond ordinary wildlife, circling as if to test her defenses, exhaling harsh, almost human-sounding breaths. Elara's immediate reaction was to retreat, half tangled in blankets, trying to put distance between herself and the intruder. She groped for anything that might serve as a weapon, a lamp, a chair, but the beast lunged before she could truly defend herself. Claw marks scored across her forearm. Blood smeared the sheets. Elara's own scream knifed through the night. Some neighbors later admitted they heard something, but assumed it to be the wind. Crescent Peak is known for unpredictable gusts, and most lock their doors tight at sundown. Whether any of them considered raising an alarm remains uncertain. By the time realization dawned, it was too late. Elara recalled her entire body thrumming with panic. The corners of her vision blurred, and all that remained in focus was the wolf's heaving torso and the gleam of its eyes, predatory yellow, reflecting in the shattered glass. She tried to crawl away, but the rogue pinned her against the dresser. The weight crushed the breath from her lungs, and the smell of copper from her own wound mingled with the predator's hot breath. In most human versus beast confrontations, the story would end there, a tragic incident of nature overpowering the unprepared. Yet Crescent Peak does not observe the boundaries of ordinary human existence. Fate, or something like it, intervened. Out of the darkness came a roar, authoritative, more furious than the rogue's snarl. In the haze, Elara glimpsed another form leaping through the ruined window. A confrontation erupted so swiftly that she could only register motion, sound, and the impact of bodies crashing into furniture. No official record documents the exact nature of what came to her rescue. Some describe it as a wolf of impossibly large stature, others as a man shifting mid-stride. Even Elara, straining to remain conscious, could not say for certain how the figure moved from wolf shape to something else. Her final memory, before losing herself to shock and blood loss, was the voice of a man, a voice with iron-like authority, snapping a command that made her assailant recoil. At this point, the accounts from a handful of Crescent Peak residents come into play. Several speak of hearing an unearthly battle cry from Elara's home, followed by silence as sudden as the uproar had begun. Some peered through windows to see if lights had gone on, but the hour was too late, the distance too far. Others, more attuned to the pack's well-guarded secrets, say they detected a resonance in that growl belonging to Jasper, the alpha rumored to watch over these territories. No one, however, dared to approach and confirm. Crescent Peak has long taught its people caution above all else. Afterward, few details exist about what transpired within those four walls. Furniture lay broken. Deep claw grooves marred the wooden floor. A smear of blood trailed from the bedroom to the living area. Something significant had transpired in that house, but only 2 individuals walked out, one of them carrying the other. When consciousness returned to Elara in fleeting bursts, she sensed her body being lifted. She remembered glimpses of a strong, unfamiliar face, perhaps the same man who had barked that command. His arms cradled her, and warmth emanated from him despite the cold air swirling through the shattered window. Though pain knifed through her shredded arm, a strange calm enveloped her for those moments, as if this person possessed a power that extended beyond mere physical strength. Onlookers, had any been present, might have observed a curious dynamic, an alpha neither gentle nor harsh, but resolute. He took Elara outside, where the night's chill met the heat of adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Some accounts say he murmured words of reassurance, others claim he said nothing at all. Either way, he stole into the darkness, presumably heading toward the pack's territory, leaving behind a ravaged home with no clear explanation for the rest of Crescent Peak to puzzle over. It is at this juncture that the attack escalates into something more. One might assume Elara needed only basic medical attention, yet the physical wounds, while severe, were secondary to another, more insidious threat. Bites from rogue wolves, especially those carrying the werewolf gene, can have transformative consequences, most dangerous of all when inflicted upon humans unprepared for such a fate. Unaware that her life now hung on a precipice between her old self and the unknown, Elara drifted in and out of awareness. By local tradition, pack law dictates that anyone wounded in this manner must be brought under the pack's protection, if not to save them, then to manage the transformation that follows. Documents from Crescent Peak's clandestine archives allude to a seldom invoked protocol. Once bitten, a human is no longer purely human. The venom and dark magic within the werewolf's bite set in motion changes that cannot be reversed. As dawn approached, rumors trickled through the settlement's quiet streets. A smashed bedroom window, blood, a violent presence, and somewhere beyond the public eye, Jasper the Alpha. Even Tristan, who had seemed so guarded the previous evening, reportedly left his own dwelling in haste, searching for any sign of what occurred. No official statements were made. No one expected any. Secrecy remains paramount in Crescent Peak, particularly when supernatural forces are involved. Though the night ended with Elara spirited away, it was only the beginning of her journey, and the pack's. Whatever personal feelings, jealousies, or loyalties had existed before were about to be tested by the gravity of this crisis. Pack hierarchy would soon collide with the reality of an injured outsider, bound to become something else. Ties that once merely hinted at tension would snap taut under the weight of the unknown. And at the eye of the storm lay Elara, clinging to life and unwittingly bound to a fate that defied everything she believed about the world. By the time the first rays of morning light broke over the wooded ridges, Elara had been transported from her ravaged home to a place few outsiders ever see. While most residents of Crescent Peak woke to their usual routines, oblivious to the night's violence, the pack was already mobilizing behind closed doors. In hushed urgency, they prepared a secluded room in their stronghold, a lodge perched at the edge of a mist-laden valley. This lodge, rumored to be where the Alpha and his highest-ranking wolves convened, would now become Elara's refuge, and if necessary her prison. No official records detail how she was smuggled through the winding streets without arousing widespread alarm. All we know is that she arrived unconscious, her arm wrapped in tight bandages to stanch the bleeding from the wolf's bite. Pack tradition dictates that when a human sustains such a wound, secrecy takes priority, both to protect that person from the fearful wrath of townsfolk and to shield the pack's own existence from those who might misuse the knowledge of their condition. In the hours that followed, Elara drifted between fevered nightmares and dim awareness. She would later describe the lodge as a place of heavy stone walls, thick wooden beams, and an ever-present hush. A faint scent of pine wood smoke pervaded its corridors. Voices murmured outside her room, but she could rarely distinguish words, just the cadence of urgency. Unseen faces came and went, checking her wounds, administering herbal tinctures with properties she couldn't begin to comprehend. One name surfaced again and again. Jasper. Though still unconfirmed by direct statement, multiple sources indicate he oversaw Elara's care, issuing instructions in tones that brooked no challenge. Some recall glimpsing him standing at her bedside, arms folded, his eyes flicking toward the bandages, the bruises, and most concerning of all, the slow spread of a venomous transformation beneath her skin. There was no sign of gentleness in his stance, no display of overt sympathy. Rather, it was said he wore the burden of duty like armor, determined to see this crisis contained. Whether his motivation sprang from guilt or genuine concern, only he could answer. Meanwhile, beyond that door, the pack prepared for possibilities they rarely confronted. Rumors circulated within the lodge that Tristan, the beta, had demanded to see Elara. A few overheard a tense exchange, Jasper instructing Tristan to stay out until her condition stabilized. Tristan protesting he had a right to know whether she would live. Pack law grants the alpha authority over all such disputes, so no further argument ensued. At least not openly. But the friction was there, simmering. However close Tristan and Jasper might once have been, this crisis threatened to expose every underlying tension between them. Elara's first coherent awakening came late in the day. She found herself propped against pillows in a room lit by a solitary lantern. A heavy door stood closed, and beyond it, distant footsteps told her she was not alone. Physically, she felt a searing ache in her arm, hot and relentless. Mentally, she wrestled with fragments of memory, the shattered glass, the rogue wolf's maw, and the savage clash that had saved her. Now her body felt different. Acute bursts of sensation flickered at the edges of her perception. Noises from beyond the thick walls seemed magnified, smells more distinct. Confusion and fear mingled in her throat. Even so, no one rushed in to calm her. The lodge inhabitants seemed intent on letting her gather her bearings before revelations broke over her like a flood. Only when a second wave of pain racked her frame did the door finally open, revealing a figure she recognized dimly from that chaotic night. Jasper, though she had not yet put a name to his face. He appraised her with the measured gaze of someone accustomed to crisis, then set a small vial on the table within her reach. His tone, from scattered recollections, held the faintest trace of command. Drink. Whether she heeded him out of trust or desperation, no one can say. But Elara swallowed the tincture, and the fire in her arm began a slow retreat. In that tenuous calm, she managed to ask where she was. His response was clipped, omitting details. You're among those who can help you. Rest now. They call this place Crescent Peak, a small, hidden settlement nestled high among steep ridges and dense evergreen forests. Few travelers pass through willingly. Fewer still choose to remain. Over the years, countless rumors have drifted down these winding roads. Fragments of old folklore, talk of uncanny howls echoing beneath the full moon, and furtive glances whenever the subject of wolves arises. Some visitors dismiss it as mere superstition. Others depart with a lingering unease they cannot explain. In recent months, a sequence of events has drawn new attention to Crescent Peak, incidents that have stoked curiosity and dread in equal measure. From the outside, the settlement appears unremarkable. Log cabins clustered around a main street, locals tending to routine tasks, life going on with quiet simplicity. Yet, beneath the surface, a potent undercurrent of mystery flows. An undercurrent that a newcomer named Elara unwittingly stirred into motion. On the tail end of a brisk autumn day, when golden leaves glowed in the last remnants of sunlight. Initially there was no welcome sign, no official boundary. But as the road curved, the sense of entering an entirely different world grew undeniable. The air itself felt charged, as though something unseen brushed by in the wind. Locals could be spotted at a distance, pausing mid-conversation to watch any unknown car pass. At first, it seemed like typical caution, yet accounts whispered at the post office and the small solitary cafe told a more layered story, that Crescent Peak values secrecy almost as much as it does survival. Elara's experiences here, a young woman with a determined spirit, who arrived looking for nothing more than a fresh start. Prior to Crescent Peak, Elara lived in a series of bustling cities, never quite settling. She hoped these mountains would offer peace. Instead, she began to notice something distinctly different about the people who called this place home. Shortly after her arrival, Elara connected with a small group of locals. Among them was Tristan, a reserved man whose careful politeness made him simultaneously approachable and distant. Tall, sharp-eyed, Tristan carried an air of quiet vigilance that set him apart from the town's more casual inhabitants. Whenever Elara, or anyone else, brought up odd sightings in the woods, rapid shadows under the moon, fresh animal tracks too large to be from regular wildlife, Tristan merely shrugged, his gaze flicking away, as though the topic pressed too close to the community's hidden truths. Elara's curiosity grew with every subtle sign. She heard snippets of conversation at the cafe, where townspeople spoke in code-like phrases about the pack, quickly changing the subject whenever an outsider sat nearby. She noticed lights in certain houses that stayed on until dawn, and the faint, haunting sound of howling that sometimes sliced through the midnight silence. No one confirmed it openly, yet no one fully denied it either. When Elara asked direct questions, she was met with guarded half-answers. At times, an older resident might offer a cryptic tidbit, "This land has its own kind of guardians," or "Don't wander alone too close to midnight," before pressing their lips shut. The sense of an invisible boundary persisted, as if the entire town balanced on a line between ordinary human life and something far more primal. Then, an unexpected name began to surface whenever conversation veered toward unspoken rules. Jasper, almost never seen, yet seemingly felt everywhere. Town rumor painted him as a figure of reverence, or possibly fear. No one would clarify his exact role. No one would say where he lived. But whenever a disturbance occurred, like a sudden disappearance of livestock or the appearance of strange claw marks in the foothills, those who mentioned Jasper did so in hushed voices, hinting that if trouble truly threatened Crescent Peak, he would act. In the midst of this swirling uncertainty, Elara found a tentative sense of acceptance. She received an invitation to a small get-together, a birthday gathering, held in her honor at the modest house she'd rented near the pines. Friends she had made, some only weeks before, arrived with homemade gifts and well wishes. Music and laughter echoed under string lights. On the surface, it felt like any ordinary celebration. But beneath that surface, Elara carried the weight of countless questions. Why did some neighbors look at her with something akin to pity, or perhaps warning, when they offered a toast? Why did Tristan linger at the edges of the room, watchful and tense, as though prepared for something to go wrong? Multiple eyewitnesses describe how, as the evening wore on, Elara's laughter occasionally faltered, a subtle crack in her warm exterior. She might have been thinking about the odd prickle in the back of her neck whenever she stood by the open window, or the glances Tristan darted at her whenever the conversation shifted to nighttime prowlers. Even so, the gathering ended without incident, just a mild sense of unease that no one could quite articulate. When the final well-wisher departed, Elara was left with half-melted candles, empty mugs, and a feeling she couldn't shake, that something out of the ordinary was looming on the horizon. Before midnight, a solitary knock sounded at her door, a knock more insistent than any courtesy visit. Whoever stood there didn't wait long. Elara later recounted how her heart skipped a beat at the abruptness. She'd expected no more guests. Upon opening it, she found a courier, delivering a small, unmarked box, and the individual left as quickly as they'd appeared. Inside that box, she discovered a silver bracelet, elegant yet unsettling in its craftsmanship. Accompanying it was a brief, unsigned note. A single line that read, "A birthday is no small occasion here." The note carried an aura of quiet authority. The closest lead anyone could offer was that it somehow related to Jasper. Yet how he knew about Elara's birthday, or why he bothered to mark it, remained a mystery. That same night, shortly after the gift arrived, an unsettling chill crept through the air. Outside, a faint gust rattled branches against window panes. Inside, Elara found her thoughts drawn to rumors of a so-called pack patrolling these hills. Was there any truth to them? A page from her personal journal, dated that evening, mentions feeling watched even after her guests were gone. The exact wording: "It's like the house is no longer just mine tonight." In the days after Elara's recovery began, her life took on a secluded rhythm within the Pack's lodge, a rhythm punctuated by guarded interactions and urgent whispers. She was confined to a series of high-ceilinged rooms connected by drafty corridors. Despite the lodge's expansive design, the walls seemed to close in, enforcing an intimacy Elara had neither requested nor fully understood. She was well enough to walk on her own, yet seldom allowed to wander unaccompanied. Someone always shadowed her steps, a pack member assigned to guide, or perhaps to watch her every move. No formal explanations were given. Instead, the pack's instructions arrived in fragments. Stay out of the moonlight until you're stronger. Don't stray beyond the courtyard. If the pain in your arm flares, call for us. Behind these directives lay a palpable sense of caution. Elara soon realized it was not only her fragile state they guarded, it was their own existence. More than once, she overheard conversations that halted the moment she appeared. The lodge held secrets, many revolving around her uncertain transformation. The first cracks in the wall of silence formed when she encountered Tristan in a dimly lit passage. Entirely unplanned, she ventured from her room in search of fresh air, and he emerged from a side door, nearly colliding with her. Though startled, he recovered swiftly, greeting her with a quiet solemnity. His eyes flicking to the bandage on her forearm, then away again, as though the sight pained him more than her. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. The tension coiled like a living thing between them. She managed a hushed apology, but he shook his head, telling her there was nothing to be sorry for. "Whatever happened," he murmured, "I'm just glad you survived." That simple statement, laced with regret, hinted at depth. Still, Elara received no immediate answers. Only the sense that Tristan carried his own guilt or grief. When she asked if he knew who attacked her, he stiffened, as though the question pried into a place he wasn't prepared to go. "I only wish I'd been there sooner," he replied, voice low. He directed her back toward her quarters, insisting she remain inside until the Alpha returned. The mention of Jasper, so rarely spoken openly, renewed the swirl of questions in Elara's mind. She had begun to attach that name to the sharp-eyed figure who kept her alive with unyielding watchfulness. Yet she had not seen him since he first ordered her to drink a curative tincture. Apparently, other leadership matters demanded his time, leaving her in the care of lesser pack members who guarded their Alpha's intentions like secrets of state. Gradually, Elara's body asserted its new reality. Fleeting episodes of acute hearing or smell overtook her without warning. The first time it happened, she caught the tang of cooking meat 3 corridors away, so intense she almost became dizzy. Another time, she recognized Tristan's footsteps long before he arrived, distinguishing his tread from others. On one especially unsettling afternoon, she sensed the presence of an unfamiliar wolf pacing just outside the lodge, though she heard no footsteps or growls, only an electric awareness that prickled beneath her skin. Whether these experiences thrilled or terrified her seemed to vary by the hour. Each moment of clarity underscored the bite's lasting impact. Rather than healing in a normal sense, her wound changed, the swollen flesh indicating a slow metamorphosis beneath the surface. She often woke from feverish half-dreams, convinced a phantom heartbeat ran parallel to her own, as though part of the beast that nearly killed her still lived in her veins, demanding to be unleashed. It was in this unsettled state that Elara came face to face with Fiona. Accounts differ on their first meeting, but all agree it was colored by barely disguised hostility. One version places them near the lodge's central hearth, where a small fire crackled. Elara, restless, tried to warm herself, and Fiona entered without greeting, posture rigid, expression steely. For several seconds, no one else was present to diffuse the tension. "So you're the outsider," Fiona said at last, voice tinged with distaste. "The one Jasper decided to spare." Elara, taken aback, replied she hadn't asked for any favors. Fiona's lip curled, as though she found the statement naive. She stepped closer, gaze flicking momentarily to Elara's bandaged arm. "Don't think this place is yours," she warned. "And don't assume Tristan's pity is something you can own. The pack has its own order. You're barely hanging on at the fringes." However cryptic Fiona's remarks seemed, they made one fact painfully obvious. Elara's presence threatened an established hierarchy, one that might include alliances, romantic or otherwise, predating her arrival. Fiona's next words, according to Elara's journal, were delivered with quiet menace. "Whatever Jasper has planned for you, stay out of my way if you value your safety." Confusion swirled in Elara's mind, and an odd pang coursed through her chest, like the primal stirrings of her new nature reacting to Fiona's hostility. Before she could reply, Fiona had walked off, leaving a silence as cold as the autumn wind seeping through the cracks of the lodge. In the following days, it became clear Fiona held significant influence. She spoke to others confidently, certain of her place near the top. Yet, despite her open disdain, she never challenged Jasper's authority outright. Instead, friction simmered in private, with cutting glances and terse words. The lodge corridors hummed with tension. Tristan alone offered a small buffer, appearing at intervals to direct Elara to places she could rest or read, urging her to ignore Fiona's barbed commentary. "Focus on getting well," he told her repeatedly. "Everything else can wait." But how long could it wait? The pack needed resolution. Elara felt the urgency deepen each time her senses sharpened or her temperature spiked. If Jasper wouldn't speak to her directly, who would guide her? Who would show her how to quell the unstoppable transformation coiled in her blood? At last, one quiet dawn, Jasper returned, stepping through the lodge's massive doors with the commanding stride of one who expected everyone to bow. Pack members parted, acknowledging him with lowered gazes. He proceeded straight to where Elara rested, expression inscrutable. She attempted to sit straighter, ignoring the ache in her arm. "We need to begin," he said simply. No explanation of what they were beginning, only an undertone of finality that left no room for debate. So, under a centuries-old stronghold, Elara prepared to face the reality that had stalked her since that rogue wolf chose her as prey. In the coming sessions, she'd learn that controlling her newly awakened senses meant discipline, anguish, and trust, a trust in a pack that had scarcely welcomed her. Whether Fiona's jealousy or Tristan's guarded concern would derail her progress remained to be seen. What was certain was that Elara stood on the threshold of a trial with no guaranteed victory. And in the swirling shadows of this lodge, the new threads of her life would be woven into Crescent Peak's tapestry, whether she wished it or not. In the early hours, under the waning glow of starlight, Elara was led out to the courtyard. The mountain air felt thin and crisp, biting at her lungs. Figures moved in slow, purposeful unison around her. Members of the Crescent Peak pack who seemed more at ease in pre-dawn darkness than most humans would be at midday. They formed a loose circle, silent and watchful, making space for Jasper and Elara at the center. It was her first time outside the lodge since the rogue's attack, and though fatigue lingered, she sensed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. It began without ceremony. Jasper told her bluntly to remove the bandages. If the sting of exposed flesh alarmed her, he showed no empathy. The wound, once a ragged bite, had taken on a strangely etched pattern, a faint silver hue where venom had begun weaving its path. Elara's breath caught at the sight, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. She could almost feel the tension coil in her muscles, that strange new awareness stirring at the back of her mind. "We'll see how far the change has taken hold," Jasper said, low and resolute. He spoke as though addressing both Elara and the onlookers, many of whom hovered at the edges, curiosity mingling with apprehension. Fiona stood off to one side, arms folded, mouth pressed in a thin line. More than once, Elara's gaze flicked her way, seeing an expression of disdain, or a challenge, as if Fiona expected her to fail. Tristan remained near the courtyard's entrance, providing no direct encouragement, only a quiet vigilance. Occasionally, Elara felt his eyes on her, tinged with concern and possibly regret. She recalled how, days ago, he'd warned her not to pry too far into Crescent Peak's affairs. Now she was fully entwined in them. Jasper's instructions were concise. Under his guidance, Elara was to harness the fledgling wolf sense inside her, beginning with something simple, identifying the faintest sounds, a twig snapping far off in the trees, wings of a bird beating overhead. This exercise might be trivial for a seasoned pack member, but for Elara, her senses were raw and unsteady. Over the next hour, as the sky shifted from dark purple to pale light, she struggled to parse the swirl of new sounds from the clamor of her human fear. Each time she faltered, Jasper's voice sliced through the confusion. Concentrate. Let instinct guide you. In these moments, she glimpsed another side of him, not gentle, but determined to push her into grasping that unfamiliar bond between body and senses. His authority acted as a tether, grounding her when she nearly spun into panic. The toll was exhaustion. Each success left her head spinning like she'd run a marathon on uneven terrain. Word of Elara's training spread quickly. Rumors circulated that the Alpha had never invested so much personal time into a newcomer, even one who'd been bitten. Some whispered that guilt drove him. Others said he had motives beyond mere responsibility. Elara heard fragments of gossip, unsure whom to believe. Despite her sharpening senses, the pack's internal politics remained murky. By midday, they shifted to a second exercise, controlling the volatile energy surging within her. At one point, Jasper guided her through a series of repetitive motions, breathing, stepping, channeling the heat in her bloodstream, while the rest watched from a short distance. She could hear them murmur in subdued tones. A faint tremor rattled her limbs, her body torn between wanting to snap and snarl, and clinging to human caution. Each time she wavered, Jasper's presence recentered her. It was a precarious dance, new instincts colliding with old fears. Then a brief interruption, Fiona. She approached from behind, her words laced with mild disdain. You're pushing her too hard. Not everyone can handle it. Before Elara could react, Jasper silenced Fiona with a single steely look. An unspoken message. This is not your call. Fiona's lips tightened. She turned away, tension radiating off her in waves. The exchange exposed the simmering discord, leaving Elara to wonder how deep Fiona's animosity truly ran, and why. Tristan, on the other hand, said little. He stood near the courtyard's edge, arms rigid, eyes alert, offering a different balance to Jasper's severity. If Jasper was a demanding mentor, Tristan was a quiet sentinel, his concern visible if not stated. Elara met his gaze once and saw a mix of relief and something else, an emotion she couldn't pinpoint. By evening, Elara's body screamed with fatigue. Muscles burned. Her mind reeled with revelations about the wolfish sense emerging inside her. Jasper abruptly adjourned training, letting her catch her breath. As the pack dispersed, she stood alone in the courtyard's fading light, her arm re-wrapped but throbbing with an almost electric rhythm. In private journal notes, Elara wrote she felt as though part of me belongs to these mountains now. And part of me remains that same woman who only wanted to start over. The collision of those two parts had begun in earnest. Still uncertain was whether her growing connection to Jasper, and the rancor it stirred in Fiona, would be a blessing or a curse. With each hour, tensions in the pack became more pronounced, like the moon itself tugged at hidden loyalties. The next phase of her trial loomed, forging alliances, quieting enemies, and, above all, learning if she could reconcile her old identity with the primal force rising within her. Whatever the outcome, one truth was clear. Elara was no longer just an outsider. She was an untested link in the chain binding Crescent Peak's secrets, whether or not she wanted to be forged into it. In the days following Elara's first official training, tension in the Crescent Peak pack rose to a noticeable peak, a current running beneath every conversation and routine gathering. While most wolves carried on scouting the forest boundaries, monitoring rogue activity, and fulfilling duties, an unspoken awareness hovered. Something momentous was about to unfold. Anyone who doubted the gravity of Elara's emergence saw those doubts vanish in the subtle shifts of pack hierarchy. Accounts from within the lodge suggest Jasper, growing scarce in public view, spent long hours in private meetings with his most trusted lieutenants. No official council convened, yet hushed discussions echoed behind closed doors. Elders who rarely left their secluded wing drifted through corridors, lines of contemplation etched on their faces. Footsteps resounded late into the night, betraying planning or strategy, though about what few dared to speculate. Among the rank-and-file wolves, conversation inevitably turned to Elara. Some, driven by curiosity more than malice, wanted to see how far her transformation might go. Others whispered concerns that her partial shift, brought on by a violent rogue, could bring dangers the pack hadn't faced before. And overshadowing all these murmurs was another question. What role did Fiona expect to play in Elara's future? By now, it was evident that Fiona's strong standing, and her relationship with Jasper, fueled her resentment toward the newcomer in unpredictable ways. Elara sensed the shift. Her daily regimen involved more drills to harness her keen senses and dampen her surging instincts. Jasper oversaw the most critical sessions, but it was Tristan who escorted her to and from, offering terse, understated reassurances. At times, his guidance bordered on compassion. At others, he seemed distant, torn between caring for her and accepting a reality he once tried to avoid. Interviews with certain wolves present at these sessions indicate Elara's capabilities were growing at a startling rate. She began picking up scents across great distances, identifying pack members by smell alone. During a scouting drill near the forest edge, she alerted them to movement in the underbrush, revealing a small pack of outsiders prowling just beyond Crescent Peak's territory. Though no confrontation followed, it proved Elara's transformation had advanced enough to grant her abilities only seasoned wolves wielded. Not all progress was smooth. Late one evening, she collapsed in the lodge courtyard, overwhelmed by a surge of shifting energy. Witnesses describe how her arm, marred by the original bite, took on a fierce glow, the venom flaring with renewed force. It lasted only a moment, but in that fleeting span, Elara allegedly emitted a half-growl, half-cry that reverberated against the stone walls. Several wolves rushed to restrain her, fearing she'd lose control entirely. She did not fully shift, her body locked in a half-state, yet her eyes glowed with lupin intensity, her strength spiking unpredictably. Jasper arrived almost instantly, intervening with precision and authority. He barked an order, and those holding Elara backed away. Stepping forward, he placed his hands on her shoulders, commanding her to focus on breathing. According to one eyewitness, the courtyard fell so silent they could hear leaves rustling in distant trees. Slowly, painfully, Elara subdued the roaring upheaval inside her. Once it passed, she sank to her knees, trembling. No one spoke as Jasper helped her to her feet. In that charged hush, Fiona stood at a distance, expression inscrutable, offering neither sympathy nor scorn. The next morning, the incident spread like wildfire. Some argued Elara's near transition proved she was too unstable, a liability. Others insisted it was exactly this trial by fire that would cement her place. If she learned to master the dangerous tipping point, she might become an asset unlike any other. Elara herself felt subdued, haunted by the fear of losing her humanity to the wild impulses beneath her skin. Quietly, Tristan began spending more time alone with her, hoping to stave off another collapse. Their conversations were guarded, but he taught her simpler control exercises, less intense than Jasper's method, yet helpful in small increments. If Elara hesitated to trust him before, she now saw glimpses of a deeper bond, a beta torn between loyalty to the alpha and the recognition that this newcomer needed his support more than ever. Meanwhile, Fiona grew bolder. Multiple wolves heard her arguing with Jasper behind closed doors. Though no direct quotes emerged, tension hung thick whenever they were in proximity. She opposed the leniency granted Elara, referencing pack traditions, possibly invoking older customs restricting a bitten human's freedoms. One theory among the more astute was that Fiona saw Elara's integration under Jasper's tutelage as a threat to her own influence. Another simpler explanation: Fiona's personal feelings for Jasper, whatever they might be, made Elara's presence intolerable. Amid these simmering conflicts, an unexpected call went out. Jasper ordered a gathering of select members at twilight. The chosen location was neither courtyard nor lodge interior, but a circle of standing stones deep in Crescent Peak's territory, a place historically reserved for pivotal pack decisions. The precise nature of what Jasper intended was undisclosed, yet rumor reached Elara in plain terms. A test, a reckoning, or both. Those who wondered whether this meant acceptance or rejection of Elara kept their doubts silent. Tensions soared as sunset painted the sky amber and violet. That evening, with a trembling heart and a wounded arm still marked by venom, Elara prepared to face the most daunting challenge yet. The unspoken question in every hush, every stern glance, every whispered vow was whether she would earn her place, or confirm the fears of those who saw her as a threat. Though uncertain how her future would unfold, one truth loomed. In Crescent Peak, the pack's word was law. And the one who held that law above all was Jasper, the alpha who had saved her, trained her, and now seemed poised to judge her worth. Twilight blanketed the mountains in a hushed glow as a select circle of Crescent Peak pack members converged on a hidden clearing. Centuries-old standing stones rose from the ground, weathered slabs arranged in a broad ring, surfaces etched with runes that glinted dully in the waning light. Rarely visited except for pivotal moments in pack history, it now awaited Elara's arrival, a reckoning that would decide her place, if any, among the wolves. She came escorted by Tristan, who wore an air of solemn duty rather than his usual guarded tension. Not far behind, Fiona followed in silence. A hush gripped the clearing as though these ancient stones absorbed the day's last birdsong. No one spoke as Elara crossed the threshold. Her senses buzzed, every subtle shift of the crowd, every distant heartbeat. Through fleeting glimpses, she saw how the pack formed a ring that mirrored the stones, leaving a path for one figure at the center. Jasper. He stood like a statue carved of starlit granite, gaze stern and unreadable. At his side, an elder cleared his throat, an unspoken cue for the ceremony to begin. A faint breeze stirred the pines, and the final rays of sunlight yielded to a velvet sky streaked with purple. Shadows lengthened, accentuating the stones until they resembled silent sentinels. Several wolves drifted to the periphery, acknowledging Jasper with quiet nods. No howls broke the silence. This gathering was about ritual and verdict, not celebration. In that stillness, Elara felt her pulse hammer. She glanced at her wounded arm, where a faint glow still traced the bite mark. A reminder of how far she'd come and how close she was to losing everything if this test went awry. In a low voice, Jasper addressed the assembly. Tonight, we witnessed the progress of one marked by a rogue. We guarded her, taught her. Now, the time has come to see if her fate ties to us, or if the venom that changed her will unravel in failure. He gestured for Elara to step forward. The pack drew its collective breath. Tristan moved aside, letting Elara face Jasper unobstructed. Under the scrutiny of many steady gazes, she fought to keep her shoulders squared, despite the knot twisting in her stomach. A few testimonies followed, short statements from wolves who witnessed Elara's trials, her small victories, her collapses. Some praised her resilience, others, wary of the rogue's taint, cast doubt on her trustworthiness. The sharpest words came from Fiona. Though her tone was outwardly respectful, hostility simmered beneath. She has shown strength, Fiona allowed. But raw strength doesn't bind a wolf to its pack. She must prove she can hold our safety above her own impulses, and above any illusions she has about rising in rank. Her gaze flicked to Elara like a blade. The message. Don't challenge me. Don't think you can replace me. A ripple of unease passed through the circle. Even those less aware sensed confrontation brewing. Yet Jasper upheld order, neither refuting nor endorsing Fiona. Letting tension speak for itself, he tilted his head, signaling Fiona to withdraw. She obliged, stepping to the stone's edge. At length, Jasper turned solely to Elara. Around them, the ring of standing stones seemed to vibrate with unspoken history, as if generations of wolves had stood precisely where she stood now, seeking acceptance or risking exile. In that moment, she sensed the raw import of this ritual, a final test of control. Jasper indicated a single weather-worn slab etched with swirling runes. He explained these markings were ancient, meant to draw out latent power in a turning wolf, if they possessed the discipline to channel it. The concept was simple yet possibly devastating. Step forward, touch the stone, endure whatever awakenings or transformations it unleashed. Remain in control of one's new nature. And acceptance was assured. Fail, and the consequences ranged from banishment to worse. A hush enveloped the clearing. Without hesitation, but not without fear, Elara advanced, senses keyed to every breath around her. She extended her injured arm, pressing her palm to the cold, rough runes. First nothing happened. Then slowly, heat flared deep in her core, spreading like wildfire, igniting a tremor in her arm and twisting her breath into ragged gasps. She fought the urge to pull away. It felt as though the stone amplified the venom in her blood, tugging at the wolfish essence brewing since she was bitten. Her muscles tensed. Her vision flickered between human clarity and something primal. A faint glow spread into the runes, tracing their contours with eerie luminescence. Elara let out a muffled cry, nails scraping the stone as her body convulsed. The watchers leaned in. Some braced to intervene if she lost control. Tristan flinched, half-stepping forward before another wolf held him back. Fiona watched with cold detachment, while Jasper's fists clenched at his sides. No one spoke. This was Elara's battle alone. In that tumult of near-shift, she forced herself to recall her training. Jasper's admonitions to harness the wolf sense, Tristan's calm reminders that she was stronger than the venom, and the fleeting faith that part of this pack wanted her to succeed. Slowly, she coaxed her human consciousness to remain at the helm, refusing to let raw instinct break free in a frenzy. Time blurred. Sweat trickled down her temples. The stone vibrated beneath her hand, channeling some ancient magic that governed the pack's legacy. At last, with a ragged breath, Elara felt the wave crest, then subside. Her body still shook, but the frenzied energy no longer dictated her actions. Inch by inch, she reclaimed her identity, neither purely human nor fully wolf, but balanced enough to keep both halves in check. When she finally released the slab, stumbling backward, two figures caught her, Tristan on one side, Jasper on the other. They lowered her gently, allowing her to breathe. In the hush that followed, a vital detail emerged. Her eyes, though bright with lingering power, had reverted to normal. No shapeshift in her limbs, no savage jaws snapping. She had contained the wolf within. A flurry of whispers rippled through the clearing. Some bowed their heads in acknowledgement, others stood stunned. Even Fiona's stern facade slipped momentarily, revealing what might have been reluctant respect, or frustration that Elara had not failed. Unsteadily, Elara looked up at Jasper. His severity eased into grudging recognition. Though no applause followed, this was not a night for celebration. There was an unmistakable sense of conclusion. She had passed the test, proven capable of controlling the wolfish blood. Her acceptance was sealed by her own will and by the silent majority who witnessed her triumph over chaos. The ceremony ended without fanfare. The ring of stones faded into darkness as the pack dispersed, returning to the lodge in soft footfalls over pine needles. Yet change coursed through the night air. For better or worse, Elara had earned a tentative standing among them. In the final notes of that evening, as the moon rose high, casting silver lines through the trees, witnesses recall one subtle detail. Elara and Jasper exchanging a curt nod, a shared understanding that their path forward was together, if not free of conflict. Meanwhile, Tristan offered her a measured smile, relief brightening his eyes. As for Fiona, she vanished into the shadows, her intentions known only to herself. The stone circle lay empty and silent once more, bearing faint traces of a light that glimmered, then faded away. And in Crescent Peak, dawn would soon break on a new landscape of possibility, where an outsider became something more, and the pack's oldest traditions bent, ever so slightly, to admit a future no one had foreseen. Barely a week passed after Elara's fateful trial before the next upheaval struck Crescent Peak. Whispers of unrest, distant sightings of an unfamiliar pack skirting their territory, rose to a feverish pitch. At first, few believed another group would risk direct confrontation. The Crescent Peak wolves were formidable. Yet in private, the pack's worries circled around one name: Fiona. Since Elara's triumph, Fiona's attitude had grown colder. She withdrew from daily activities, no longer engaged in training or patrols. Rumors flew. Perhaps she plotted something darker, or sought help beyond the borders to reassert her place. Some recalled seeing her wander alone by moonlight, muttering about changes wrought by Elara's arrival. Then came the first confirmed sighting of a rival pack crossing into Crescent Peak territory. Small in number but highly disciplined, as if they possessed crucial knowledge of Crescent Peak's defenses. Reports soon reached Jasper and Tristan. The question was, why risk a battle they seemed too few to win? The unsettling answer lay in Fiona's disappearance mere hours before the intruders arrived. It didn't take much to suspect that her jealousy and rage led her to bargain with outside forces. The idea was shocking. None expected a wolf of her standing to betray the pack she once fought to protect. Yet the pattern was clear. These newcomers wielded uncanny insight into Crescent Peak's terrain and leadership vulnerabilities. A senior scout confided to Elara, "It's like they've been handed a map of our weaknesses." Word spread. Confrontation was imminent. Jasper summoned every able wolf at dawn in the courtyard to plan the defense. Elara, still newly accepted, volunteered for the front lines. Many assumed Tristan would dissuade her, but he placed a hand on her shoulder, nodded, and said quietly, "We stand together now." Whatever private frictions lingered, the pack united as one, save for the glaring absence of Fiona. When the rival pack struck, they did so beneath a storm-laden sky. Lightning crackled over distant peaks, illuminating a battlefield in the hollow of Crescent Peak's outer slopes. Furious skirmishes erupted, wolves colliding in half-shifts, jaws snapping, raw power unleashed. Despite being outnumbered, the rival wolves fought grimly, seemingly fueled by whatever Fiona had shared. Jasper led from the front, commanding with terse orders that rallied even the youngest fighters. Tristan, leading a flank assault, guided Elara and others along a ridge to outmaneuver the invaders. There, Elara put her training to use, her heightened senses picking up lurking threats, alerting Tristan's group to pivot and avoid ambush. More than once, she and Tristan fought back-to-back, driving off lunging adversaries in a whirlwind of teeth and claws. Though battered, they persevered. In the melee, the name Fiona rose in rival wolves' taunts, sometimes a rallying cry, sometimes an attempt to unsettle Crescent Peak's ranks. Hearing it confirmed the darkest suspicions. Fiona hadn't merely abandoned them, she'd allied with their enemy. She gave them an advantage and an emotional blow. Thunder rumbled overhead, the conflict escalating to a final push. Jasper, emanating alpha authority, forced the rival alpha into direct combat, their snarls echoing in the pines. With a burst of speed, Jasper cornered the intruder, delivering a decisive blow, driving him down. A harsh snap of teeth, and the rival alpha collapsed with a ragged growl of defeat. All around, Crescent Peak seized the upper hand. Leaderless, wounded, the invaders broke ranks and fled into the forest with panicked howls. Rain fell in slanted sheets, mingling with the scent of blood and churned earth. The storm raged, but the worst was over. Hours later, survivors regrouped. It was clear the rival pack was gone, routed in disarray. Their hastily abandoned camps gave no clue where they'd gone. And amid the muddy field, Fiona was nowhere to be seen. Some half expected to find her body among the fallen. Others feared she'd resurface to strike. But as the blood and darkness settled, she was simply absent. No word, no final showdown, no resolution. She had vanished as swiftly as she'd betrayed them. In the battle's aftermath, Tristan turned to Elara, exhaustion etched on his face. "She's gone," he stated. "We can't be sure where." Not even Jasper offered clarity. As Alpha, He surveyed the field with grim lines carved into his brow. The cost of Fiona's betrayal and her disappearance gnawed at him. She'd shared a long history with this pack, and her knowledge nearly tore their family apart. Yet for all the chaos, Crescent Peak remained. Their bond, tested in thunder and blood, held. Elara, no longer an outsider, played a pivotal role in defending her new home. Though bruised, the pack closed ranks, rebuilding, honoring the fallen. And still, the question of Fiona's fate loomed like a silhouette in the rain. As dawn broke in pale streaks, the wolves gathered for a hushed reflection. No one uttered Fiona's name. No one dared guess if she still plotted revenge or had fled to distant lands, nursing resentment. Her treachery hung unresolved, a chilling reminder that even the closest bonds in times of jealousy can crack wide open. For now the threat had been quelled. The rival pack defeated, Crescent Peak stood victorious, albeit scarred. Those scars would mend eventually. But the scar of betrayal, and the mystery of Fiona's ultimate fate, lingered like a ghost at the forest's edge. Perhaps she lay wounded, perhaps she plotted anew. Or maybe she was gone, never to return. No one in Crescent Peak could say for certain. And that lingering question, poised on the lips of every surviving wolf, would shape the moonlit nights yet to come. After all, for those who've tasted power and vengeance, the story rarely ends with a single defeat.
Like, share and subscribe to show the author support and love.